Hi hand readers, I'm Jennifer, I'm based in Johannesburg and I've been reading hands for many years. Welcome if you haven't been to my channel before, so wonderful to have you here. Today I'm going to be talking about pentagrams. I've had a steady stream of inquiries over the years about the alluring manifestation of a convergence of lines in the hands that forms a five-pointed star, of course also known as a pentacle. Now, a pentagram is not the same as a star. Here's an image of a star so that you know what a star exactly looks like in case you don't know. And most of the pentagrams that I've seen look like this particular image. As you can see, it's in the plane of Mars on the edge of the moon mount. This is a particularly good example from my collection. For the most part, people with pentagrams on their palms, people who've noticed their own pentagrams, that is, because of course you do get people who don't even know that they've got the pentagram. And that can be fun. Like in the image I've just shown you, that lady didn't know that she had a pentagram in her hands. It was exciting for her. But if you know that you have a pentagram and you have been looking at it and pondering it, meditating on it, it's quite likely that you have your own subjective interpretation, which will be based on your beliefs, on your personal philosophy, on your own psychology, and what that symbol means for you personally. It would be very specific. It would be like putting a tattoo on your body, and only you really know the extent of what that symbolic image might mean for you. Now, how do hand readers look at this accidental convergence of lines? Because it is an accidental convergence of lines. It can be termed a pictogram. For many hand readers, it's completely meaningless. In fact, they poo-poo the idea of any possible meaning. It's absolutely coincidental. It means absolutely nothing, and it's not given any credibility in the realm of hand reading. So that is one approach. We might look at that this is just an accident. It means absolutely nothing. Then for other readers like myself who are more intuitively based, there is more to this five-pointed star than perhaps meets the eye. I've always maintained that intuition is approximately 1/3 of the skill of the hand reader, of the chirologist or palmist. The other two have to do with the system of how to read hands and the delivery in terms of the counseling and coaching component that goes with being a hand reader. Hand readers like myself who sense through a more right brain and a divergent lens are really called, are beckoned to enter kind of a portal as you perceive this feature. It's as if it calls, it offers a resonance, and it brings imagery and sensation. There's an invitation from source. It's like a download for me personally. It's like I have this knowing. There's a saying that I was taught by my very original and very first palm reader in 1990. He said to me that knowing is more senior than belief, that belief is an action of the mind and knowing is a sensation of the soul. So symbolic meanings get triggered and we receive a download in the form of light language. In other words, light language really does come from the soul. It comes from the heart. It's a knowing that one cannot really put into left brain analytical context. It's inexplicable. This is truly the psychic. It comes from the source. The information comes as metaphors, it comes as sounds, colors, sensations, even smells. And then we're called to ascribe the possible meanings and to channel them and to inform the client of what we perceive through this feature. And of course, we could discuss many possible meanings here, which I'll get into in a moment. But divination does, as I've said a minute ago, definitely does form a very large component of the hand reader's work, especially for those who read in the way that I do. Perhaps some of you can share with me your experiences of your intuitive perceptions when you've been reading hands. How does it feel for you? And do you agree with me that intuition is 1/3 of the hand reader's craft? So when we're looking at symbols such as the pentagram and several others, we set aside our scientific know-how, which of course is 1/3 and tremendously important for us to know. We're not just randomly reading hands. We have an infrastructure, it's a context, it's very specific, especially in the 5-element system that I teach. I do see the esoteric symbol of a pentagram as being very magical. It does obviously traditionally have magical associations. It's like an interstellar stargate, perhaps. We can travel through it, we can perceive through it, we can enter the portal of perception and perceive pentagrams. Now, lots of people don't perceive the pentagrams. And then I might also say that often the pentagrams are not perfect, but there's enough of a sense of the feature that talks to you somehow. Of course, pentagrams have many traditional associations. For example, in the Christian tradition, they represented the five senses. In certain traditions, they represent the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. In the Western tradition, they represent stardom, fame. In medieval Arab and Jewish cultures, they represent something occult. It's as if they're talismans against evil that could exorcise demons. And then, of course, there's the pentagram of Venus, which is the path that the planet Venus creates when she moves through the heavens. So I believe that the association of the pentagram with the elements could show that the person potentially enjoys a really deep connection with God consciousness. It's as if there's a link in them to the elements, the natural elements. There's a love of nature, there's a love of spirit. There could be, church could be nature for them. So that's one possible meaning, one interpretation, certainly an area of inquiry when you're sitting with a client with a pentagram. Another meaning could be that they are in fact spiritual initiates, that they are seekers, that they're the eternal student, looking at life through the kind of eyes of wonder of the spiritual initiate. I love that meaning as well. It's a lovely area of inquiry too. Another meaning could be that the person is very efficient at harnessing and balancing their emotions, that they don't lose emotional control. And then if we link to the pentacle suite in the tarot deck, we could say that money could be a very relevant theme. Perhaps they're driven by the desire for material security. Then there's the question of which hand it appears in. Is it in the right hand, assuming the person is right hand active? It could show the healer, it could show a person who channels energy. Certainly it would signify an awareness of spirituality. It could also show them as being in service to others. Traditionally, of course, especially if the point points upward and the two bottom points point downward, which is the preferred way to see a pentagram, because in the inverse of that, it's supposed to be the sign of the devil or Lucifer. I'll come to that in a moment. But if that, with that single point upward, we could say the person might be able to function with crystal clarity. One way or another, it's a lucky or auspicious marking in the hands. The person can essentially thank their lucky star. In the left hand, the traditional association could be a little bit more sort of so-called satanic. I don't really love that, but let's say potentially they could mess with people's energies. They have sorceristic abilities. They have power in a way, which of course can be turned to the good. There's no reason to suspect it needs to be anything unpleasant or negative or creepy in any way. And of course, if one has that kind of power in oneself, we hope that it is for the good and you would channel and guide your client accordingly. They certainly would be able to channel their abilities in possible, very positive ways. I think of that as the natural Merlin, the natural magician really, who has magical skills but is going to use their ability to manifest, the ability to heal, to assist, to enlighten, to relieve and uplift others. And now we come to the precise position on the palm. And amongst all my many thousands of handprints, I've only really seen clear, well-defined, let's call them good pentagrams in 4 different positions. As you saw earlier, I've seen them on the edge of the plane of Mars and on Moon Mount, somewhere in that area just sort of below or connected to the airline, the headline. I've seen them on the Mount of Mars, between the webbing between the thumb and the base of the index finger, the water finger. I've seen on extremely rare occasions a pentagram underneath the ring finger on the Apollo Mount, Sun Mount. Here's an example of a pentagram at the upper part of the Venus Mount bordering on the Mars Mount. As you see, it's not perfect, but it was enough when I did the reading for this particular client to give me that sense of the energy, the capacity in the person for manifestation, for love. You know, that we could also look at it in the negative. We could say the person is star-crossed in love. In other words, unlucky in love. So it really much would always depend on the rest of the hands and on the information that comes to you from source, comes to you from spirit, and the messages that you receive on behalf of the person you're reading for. And I've presented them in my book called Signs and Symbols on the Mounts, or Palmistry, Signs and Symbols on the Mounts. Here's the cover just to reference it. And in this book, I've gone into a little bit deeper meanings, all I could really find in my research, as well as what kind of came through me as possible interpretations for this particular beautiful marking. Please share with me your own pentagrams if you happen to have them in your hands. You'll find my email address at the end of the video, and I'd love to see the photographs. What is your take on pentagrams in hands? I think it's becoming more popular to understand what it might mean to have this kind of tattooed or any other feature like letters and so on that emerge from the convergence of lines in the hands. Do we read into them? Don't we read into them? What's your take on that? Put your comments below. And next week I'll be talking about the rings of Solomon. I hope you'll be watching and listening. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next week.